The hospital air, a sterile, cloying perfume of antiseptic and quiet despair, clung to my clothes, my skin, my very soul. For 21 days, that scent had been my world. 21 days of fluorescent lights that never dimmed, of the rhythmic, indifferent beeping of machines that tethered me to life, and of the hushed, somber tones of doctors discussing my odds. It was a place where hope came to die under a veneer of professional courtesy. But I hadn't died. I was weaker, a good 20 pounds lighter, a ghost of the man I'd been. But I was alive. And all I wanted, with a desperation that was a physical ache, was to see my boys. I'd waved off the nurse's suggestion to call for a ride. I wanted to surprise them. I took a taxi to my own house, a house that suddenly felt like a distant memory. My hands, thin and papery, trembled as I counted out the bills for the driver. The short walk to the front door felt like a marathon. Each step was a negotiation between willpower and the profound weakness in my limbs. I leaned against the familiar oak tree in the front yard, its rough bark a grounding presence, and caught my breath. The lights were on. A warm, golden glow spilled from the living room windows, painting a perfect picture of domestic peace. I could hear the faint murmur of their voices, the sound of laughter. It was a balm to my raw nerves. A surge of love, fierce and overwhelming, washed over me, so powerful it almost sent me to my knees. My sons, Mark, Leo, Daniel, and Sam. My 4 pillars, my legacy. Everything I had ever worked for, everything I had ever sacrificed for, was inside that house. With a deep, shuddering breath, I pushed myself off the tree and walked the final few feet to the front door. I pulled out my key, my heart swelling with anticipation. I imagined their faces lighting up, the shock giving way to relief, the strong, enveloping hugs I'd been dreaming of for 3 long weeks. I paused, my hand hovering over the lock, wanting to savor this perfect final moment of reunion before stepping back into my life. And that's when I heard them clearly. "It's just a matter of time anyway," Mark, my eldest, the pragmatist, was saying. His voice was devoid of emotion, clinical. The doctors were clear. This last bout took a massive toll. The next one, whether it's a month or a year from now, will be the end. So we just wait? That was Leo, my second, always impatient, always focused on the bottom line. He's going to need round-the-clock care, a nurse, maybe even a live-in aide. Who's going to pay for that? Do you have any idea what that costs? It'll drain every last cent he has. There won't be anything left. A cold dread, insidious and paralyzing, began to seep into my bones, chilling me more than the sharp November air. I froze, my hand still outstretched, and pressed my ear against the cold, solid wood of the door. "There are other options," Daniel, my third, said. His voice was lower, conspiratorial. The voice he always used when he was about to suggest something clever, something slightly illicit. Humane options. In Oregon, they have laws. For people who are suffering. Dignity in dying, they call it. It would be a mercy, really. A way to end his pain before it gets worse. A mercy. The word twisted in my gut like a knife. They weren't talking about my comfort. They were talking about their convenience. Then came the final blow, from Sam, my youngest, my baby, the one I'd always protected the most. His voice was hesitant, reedy, but the words were the cruelest of all because they were coated in a pathetic veneer of self-justification. And the house would be ours, free and clear. We could sell it, split the proceeds 4 ways. We could all finally get clear of our debts, maybe even have a little left over to invest. It's what he would want, right? For us to be secure. The key, which had felt like a passport back to my life, now felt like a shard of ice in my palm. The overwhelming love I'd felt just moments before curdled into something black, toxic, and corrosive. This wasn't a family discussing the care of their ailing father. This was a pack of vultures circling a carcass, growing impatient for the feast. They were planning my murder and cloaking it in the sanctimonious language of mercy and financial security. The world narrowed to two things: the rough grain of the wood against my cheek and the venomous, soul-destroying words poisoning the air in my home. The profound weakness I'd felt since leaving the hospital, the bone-deep weariness of a man who had stared into the abyss, vanished. It was burned away by a surge of pure, white-hot adrenaline, a chemical fire of rage and betrayal that coursed through my veins, making my heart pound with a strength it hadn't had in years. I didn't need a key. I took 2 deliberate steps back from the door. I lifted my right foot, the one that had felt so unsteady just moments before, and I kicked. I put every ounce of my newfound strength, every bit of my shattered heart, every memory of every sacrifice I had ever made for them into that single, violent motion. The sound was explosive. The solid oak jambs splintered around the deadbolt. The door flew inward, ripped from its hinges, and slammed against the interior wall with a deafening, echoing crash. 4 faces, illuminated in the warm lamplight, snapped towards the sound. 4 mouths fell open. 4 pairs of eyes widened in a comical, synchronized display of disbelief and horror. They looked like burglars caught red-handed, which, in a way, they were. They were trying to steal my life, my home, my legacy. The room was utterly silent, the air thick and heavy with their suffocating betrayal. I took a step over the threshold, my shoes crunching on the shattered fragments of the doorframe. I looked at each of them, my gaze a physical force. I lingered on Mark, the cold-hearted ringleader, then Leo, the greedy pragmatist, then Daniel, the slick, amoral schemer. And finally, Sam, the spineless, greedy child whose betrayal cut the deepest. "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't a shout. It was something far more terrifying. It was a low, guttural rumble, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. It was the sound of a man whose world had just been irrevocably destroyed. They stared, frozen in a tableau of guilt. "I said," I repeated, taking another deliberate step into the room, my gaze sweeping over the comfortable chairs and the family photos on the mantelpiece that now seemed like a grotesque mockery. "Get out of my house. Now." Mark, ever the leader, found his voice first. It was a pathetic, strangled stammer. "Dad, we were just talking. We didn't." "I heard you," I cut him off. The word sharp enough to draw blood. "I heard every single word. You want me dead? You want my house? You will have neither." I pointed a trembling, accusatory finger toward the gaping, dark hole where my front door used to be. "Get out. Get out before I call the police and have every one of you charged with conspiracy to commit murder." The word murder broke the spell. It was real. It was in the room with us. They scrambled, a panicked, clumsy flurry of motion. They grabbed jackets and keys, knocking over a lamp in their haste. They wouldn't meet my eyes. They couldn't. They were cowards, exposed in their venality. In less than a minute, they were gone, their cars peeling out of the driveway one by one, their taillights disappearing into the cold, indifferent night. I stood alone in the wreckage of my doorway, the November wind whistling through the house, chilling me to the bone. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a hollow, cavernous emptiness so profound it was a physical pain in my chest. I had walked out of that hospital a man who thought he had everything to live for. I had walked into my own home and discovered in the space of 5 minutes that I had nothing at all. I stumbled to my leather armchair, the one they'd all fought over as children, and collapsed into it. The silence of the house was absolute now, a crushing weight. My wife, Eleanor, had been gone for 10 years, but in that moment, I felt her presence more strongly than ever. Her voice, a gentle ghost in my memory, whispered a phrase she had repeated so many times over the years, a warning I had never truly heeded. "Arthur, my love, our job is not just to give them wings. It's to teach them how to fly. If you carry them everywhere, they will never learn." I had carried them. I had been their safety net, their bank, their perpetual solution, and in doing so, I had taught them nothing but entitlement and greed. I had raised them to be weak, and their weakness had curdled into something monstrous. I had failed them, but that thought was secondary to the overwhelming truth. They had failed me in the most fundamental, most unforgivable way a child can fail a parent. With a strength born of pure resolve, I pushed myself out of the chair and walked to my study. The room was my sanctuary, a place of order, logic, and ledgers. I switched on the desk lamp and pulled open the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I didn't pull out one file. I pulled out 4. Each one was thick, heavy with the weight of years of documentation. Each was meticulously labeled: Mark, Leo, Daniel, Sam. An accountant's mind does not discard data. For 35 years, I had documented everything. I opened Mark's file. It was the thickest, a monument to a life of reckless ambition and zero accountability. 4 years at Stanford, a cool $250,000, paid in full. The seed money for his first tech startup, which vanished without a trace. $100,000. The second startup, a guaranteed success. Another, $75,000. I found the cancelled check from 5 years ago, the one I wrote to a man with cold eyes and no last name to cover Mark's gambling debts. $50,000. I remembered Mark's tearful promises that he was done, that he'd learned his lesson. Lies. All of it. Next, Leo's file. A business degree from USC, followed by a string of get-rich-quick schemes. The down payment on his sleek condo in the city. The one with the view, $75,000. The 3 luxury cars he'd leased and subsequently crashed over the last decade, with me co-signing and foolishly covering the insurance shortfalls and penalties. Over $60,000. I found the documents for the business loan I had co-signed for his disastrous foray into restaurant ownership. A debt of $150,000 that now hung over my name as much as his. Daniel, the artist. His file was filled with receipts from expensive art supply stores, tuition for workshops in Tuscany, and rent for a trendy loft in New York. The gallery he opened that was, as I later found out, just a front for lavish parties and a way to impress women. $80,000. The legal fees from his various misunderstandings with business partners, landlords, and dealers. Another $40,000, paid quietly to make the problems go away. And finally, Sam, my youngest. His file was a heartbreaking testament to my own failure. It wasn't a few large sums. It was a slow, steady bleed. Rent on his apartment for the past 6 years. His car, his insurance, his phone bill, his student loans. A constant, reliable drip of thousands of dollars a month. All disguised as helping him find his feet. He was 28 years old, and he had never truly paid for anything in his life. I spread the records across my large oak desk. The numbers, written in my own precise hand, told a stark, brutal story. I pulled out my adding machine, the old, heavy kind, and began to tabulate. The clicking of the machine was the only sound in the silent house. The final number on the tape was staggering. Just over $1.5 million. Not loans. Not investments. It was the price of my own foolishness, the cost of mistaking enabling for love. I looked at the photograph of Eleanor on the corner of my desk. Her smile was warm, But her eyes, I now realized, held a hint of sadness, of worry. A worry I had always dismissed. Sometimes, Arthur, her voice echoed in my mind. The most loving thing you can do is to let them fall, so they can learn to pick themselves up. They hadn't just wanted me to fall. They had wanted to push me over the edge and divvy up my bones. A new kind of resolve settled over me, as cold and hard as the marble paperweight on my desk. I had spent my life building a world for them. Now I would spend what was left of it methodically dismantling the false worlds they had built on my back. I had been their provider, their protector, their fool. Now I would become their consequence. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked up the phone. My first call wasn't to a contractor to fix the shattered door. It was to my lawyer. The game was on. Robert Harrison's office was a fortress of quiet competence. All mahogany, leather-bound legal texts, and the hushed, expensive scent of old money. He had been my personal and corporate attorney for 20 years, a sharp, pragmatic man who valued logic and legal precedent above all else. "Arthur, my God," he said, rising from his chair as his secretary showed me in. His professional composure was momentarily broken by genuine shock. "I thought you were still at St. Jude's. You look like you've seen a ghost." "I was discharged this morning, Robert," I said, my voice flat as I sank into the plush leather chair opposite his desk. "I went home. I received a surprise." I didn't tell him about the euthanasia plot. Not at first. The humiliation was a private, festering wound. To speak it aloud would be to give it more power. Instead, I framed it in the language he understood best: finance, assets, and betrayal. "I've made a decision," I began, my voice devoid of the emotion that was churning in my gut. "I am completely restructuring my estate. Effective immediately, I want to sever all financial ties with my sons. Furthermore, I want to call in every outstanding debt, every co-signed loan, every financial obligation they have, both to me and to others." Robert leaned back, steepling his fingers. He raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You mean the gifts? Arthur, we've had this conversation before. You know as well as I do that without formal signed loan agreements, there's no legal standing. A gift is a gift." "I'm not talking about the gifts," I said, leaning forward, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. "The $1.5 million I've poured into their lives is gone. That's the price of my education. I'm talking about the things that have my signature on them, the business loans I co-signed for Mark and Leo, the mortgages, the car leases, and I'm talking about their other debts, the ones they think I don't know about. I want to buy them." Robert's expression shifted from professional skepticism to deep concern. "Buy their debts? Arthur, what are you talking about? You want to become their creditor?" "I want to become their only creditor," I clarified. "I want every single financial pressure point in their lives to lead back to one place, to me." "This is highly unorthodox," he said slowly. "This is an act of war, not estate planning. What on earth happened when you went home?" And so I told him. I told him everything. I recounted the conversation I'd overheard through the door, the words that had shattered my world. I described each son's role in the morbid little play they had rehearsed. Mark's cold logic, Leo's avarice, Daniel's slick suggestion of mercy, and Sam's pathetic justification about inheritance. As I spoke, the professional mask fell away from Robert's face, replaced by a look of profound human disgust. When I finished, the silence in the opulent office was long and heavy. Robert stared at me, his mind clearly processing the legal and moral implications of what I had just revealed. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The loyally caution was gone, replaced by a hard, steely edge. "I'll have the incorporation papers for Apex Financial Recovery drawn up by morning. We'll need a clean corporate shield, completely separate from your personal assets. This needs to be airtight. Apex Financial Recovery. It sounded cold, impersonal, and powerful. It was perfect. I want to start immediately, I said. I need a private investigator, the best you know. Someone who can dig into every corner of their financial lives. I have my own records, but I want to know what they've hidden. I want a complete blueprint of their vulnerabilities. I have just the person, Robert said, already making a note on his legal pad. Ms. Thorne. She's ex-Treasury, specialized in forensic accounting. She's discreet, thorough, and frankly, terrifyingly effective. If they have a hidden credit card or an undeclared asset, she will find it. The next few weeks were a blur of intense, focused activity. It was a strange, grim paradise of the business deals I had structured my entire life. But instead of building something, we were meticulously planning a demolition. Robert handled the complex legal architecture, creating the corporate entity, establishing its bank accounts, and preparing the legal groundwork for what was to come. Meanwhile, I met with Ms. Thorne. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. There was no sentiment in her work. It was all data, patterns, and exposure. I gave her my files, a 30-year history of my son's financial dependence. This is a solid baseline, she'd said, her voice crisp. But the real story is always in the debts they hide, not the ones they ask you to pay. Her report, delivered a week later via a secure server, was a masterpiece of financial archaeology. It was even worse than I had imagined. She had unearthed a tangled web of deceit and desperation. Mark, my tech entrepreneur, was not just a bad day trader. He was being investigated by the SEC for potential insider trading. He was also over $100,000 in debt to a high-stakes online poker syndicate that was known for its aggressive collection methods. Leo, my real estate mogul, had taken out a second, secret mortgage on his condo from a hard money lender at an exorbitant interest rate. The money hadn't gone into a business. Ms. Thorne's report included credit card statements detailing trips to Vegas, purchases of luxury watches, and payments to a high-end escort service. He was 3 months behind on both mortgages. Daniel, the artist, was more of a con artist. He was being sued by the 2 different investors in his gallery for fraud. Worse, he was entangled with a loan shark for over $30,000, and the interest was compounding daily. And Sam, my sweet, helpless baby, had a secret. He had been systematically selling off the valuable collection of rare books I had built for him over the years, a collection I intended to be his inheritance. He was selling his own future to fund a lifestyle of parties and fleeting pleasures, all while still collecting his generous monthly allowance from me. Every dollar I had given them had been a match to light another fire. They weren't just irresponsible. They were parasites, their lives a complex architecture of lies built upon a foundation of my love and my money. With Ms. Thorne's report in hand, we began the acquisition phase. Through Apex Financial, we moved quickly and quietly. We bought Mark's poker debt for 40 cents on the dollar. The syndicate was happy to get a guaranteed payout. We bought out the hard money lender on Leo's second mortgage, becoming the primary lien holder after the bank. We paid off Daniel's loan shark in full, and the signed debt instrument was transferred to Apex. For each of my sons, I was now their single largest and most dangerous creditor. They thought they were juggling a dozen different problems, a dozen different threats. They had no idea that all of their problems now had one name: mine. The evening before the first official notices were to be sent out, I sat in my study. The front door had been replaced with a solid oak slab and a new heavy-duty deadbolt. The house was secure. My mind was clear. My heart, however, was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Eleanor's picture seemed to watch me from the desk. I knew she would have been horrified by their betrayal, but I also knew she would have understood the response. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. It was about reclaiming the dignity they had tried to strip from me. It was the final, painful lesson from a father who had nothing left to give but consequences. The game was ready. The first call came, as I expected, from Leo. It was 2 days after the first wave of certified letters had been delivered. His voice, usually so full of swagger and confidence, was thin and reedy, with a panic he couldn't conceal. "Dad? Dad! Thank God you answered. I got this. This insane letter. From some company, Apex Financial Recovery. They're saying they bought my credit card debt from 3 different banks and are demanding the full balance. It's like $45,000 in 10 days. This has to be some kind of scam, right? Can you get your lawyer to look at it?" I let a beat of silence pass, picturing him in his overpriced condo, the carefully constructed facade of his life beginning to crumble. I kept my voice neutral, tinged with just the right amount of detached, fatherly concern. "That sounds very stressful, son. Have you tried calling the company directly?" "Of course I did. It was like talking to a robot. Some woman with a voice like ice just kept repeating that the debt was legally acquired and payment in full was non-negotiable. Dad, I don't have that kind of money. You know that. Can you help me out? Just this once. I'll pay you back, I swear. Maybe you could call them, pretend to be my financial advisor or something." The old script, the familiar desperation. It used to work every time. "I'm a little busy right now, Leo," I said, my voice cool. "But you're a smart guy. I'm sure you'll figure something out." I hung up before he could launch into his next pathetic plea. Mark called an hour later. There was no confusion in his voice, only pure, unadulterated rage. "What the hell did you do?" he roared into the phone, without even a hello. "My broker just called me, screaming his head off. He said, 'You some company you own, bought my margin debt. They're going to liquidate my entire portfolio on Monday morning to cover the call. I'll be wiped out.'" "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mark," I said calmly, examining a speck of dust on my desk. "My investments are all in conservative mutual funds. You know I don't play the market." "Don't you dare play dumb with me, you old bastard," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "Apex Financial! It's you, isn't it? This is because of that night, isn't it? You're trying to ruin me." "That night," I said, my voice dropping into a lower register, a cold, hard tone that silenced his rant, "was the last time I considered you my son. You are now a business obligation, and your account is severely past due. I suggest you consult an attorney." "I don't have money for an attorney because you're stealing it all." "I'm not stealing anything, Mark. I'm collecting." It's a fundamental concept of finance, one you might want to familiarize yourself with. I disconnected the call as he was in the middle of a string of screamed obscenities. Daniel and Sam, predictably, called together on speakerphone, a united front of weakness. Daniel, the smooth talker, took the lead, his voice slick and placating, the voice he used to con investors. "Dad, look, we know we messed up. We know we screwed up badly. What we said that night, it was horrible, unforgivable. We were just stressed about you, about the money, and we were talking crazy. But this, buying up our debts, it's cruel, Dad. We're your family." "My family," I said flatly, "does not discuss my euthanasia as a viable financial strategy. You, Daniel, have 30 days to settle your account with Apex Financial, or we will proceed with legal action that will make your current fraud lawsuit seem like a parking ticket. And you, Sam," I added, my voice hardening, "should start packing your bags. Your free ride is over." "What assets?" Sam wailed in the background, his voice breaking. We don't have any assets. Oh, I think you'll be surprised what a good legal team can find when they start looking, I said, and hung up. The next phase of their attack was as predictable as it was pathetic. They tried to turn the family against me, to isolate me, to paint me as a senile old man being manipulated, or worse, as a monster. My sister Carol called from Florida, her voice laced with a carefully manufactured concern that had been planted by my sons. "Arthur, the boys are worried sick about you," she began. "They called me in tears. They say you're not yourself since you got out of the hospital, that you're being taken advantage of by some shady company. They think someone is manipulating you into destroying your own family." "The only manipulation I've been a victim of, Carol," I said patiently, "has been at the hands of my 4 sons for the last 35 years. Do me a favor. Ask them individually how much money I've given them over their lifetimes. Then, after you've recovered from the shock, ask them what they were discussing the night I came home from the hospital." They tried official channels. A complaint was filed with Adult Protective Services, alleging elder financial abuse and diminished capacity. An earnest young social worker named Mr. Evans paid me a visit. I welcomed him into my study, offered him a cup of coffee, and laid out my meticulously organized files. I showed him the reports from my doctors confirming my full mental competency. I showed him the corporate structure of Apex Financial, prepared by one of the city's top law firms. I showed him Ms. Thorne's reports. He left an hour later, apologizing profusely for wasting my time and assuring me the case would be closed as unfounded. They pooled what little money they had left and hired a lawyer, a bottom feeder whose letterhead looked cheap. He sent a blustering, threatening letter to Robert Harrison, full of empty accusations and legal jargon. Robert sent back a single-page response. It was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, calmly outlining the legal grounds for countersuits, for defamation, harassment, and conspiracy, complete with excerpts from Ms. Thorne's reports on my son's various frauds and hidden debts. The lawyer quietly withdrew from the case the next day. With every move they made, I was a step ahead. I had spent a lifetime cleaning up their messes. I knew their playbook. Their desperation made them sloppy. Their panic made them predictable. The pressure mounted, day by day. Mark's portfolio was liquidated in a fire sale, wiping out every cent he had and leaving him still in debt. Leo's luxury car was repossessed from his condo's parking garage in the middle of the night, a quiet, humiliating spectacle for his wealthy neighbors. Daniel received a formal summons for his fraud case. His only source of potential legal funding was now the entity that was ensuring he would face the charges alone. And Sam's landlord, after not receiving a rent check for the first time in 6 years, served him an eviction notice. Their world was collapsing, not with a single dramatic bang, but with a series of quiet, devastating clicks. A declined credit card at a restaurant, a disconnected phone line, a locked door to an office they could no longer afford. The final desperate gambit came a week before Thanksgiving. An invitation, delivered by hand from a nervous, twitchy-looking Sam. It was a card, embossed with a picture of a fall harvest. A family dinner at my sister Carol's house. To talk things through, the card read in Daniel's elegant script, to heal. It was transparently an ambush. They would gather the extended family, put me on display in front of my aunts, uncles, and cousins, and perform a public spectacle of remorse. They would cry. They would beg. They would try to use the weight of the entire family to shame me into submission. They still didn't understand. I was immune to their shame. I was immune to them. "I'll be there," I told Sam, who looked so pathetically relieved he almost cried. He had no idea I was planning an ambush of my own. Thanksgiving. A day for gratitude, for family, for coming together. The irony was so thick, so grotesquely poignant, I could taste it. I spent the morning not in the kitchen basting a turkey, but in my study with Robert Harrison, going over the final devastating documents. 4 thick manila folders sat on my polished desk, each one a legal testament to a life of irresponsibility, each one a final, crushing consequence. Foreclosure notices for Leo's condo, asset seizure orders for Mark's remaining possessions, wage garnishment filings to be served at whatever menial jobs they might eventually find, and for Daniel, a carefully compiled file of his fraudulent activities, ready to be delivered to the district attorney's office as a gesture of corporate citizenship from Apex Financial. Everything was legal, notarized, and ready to be executed. "This will be a Thanksgiving they'll never forget," Robert said, a grim, satisfied smile touching his lips. He had taken their betrayal of me almost as a personal affront. "It's the last thing I'll ever give them," I replied, my voice flat. I felt no joy, no triumph, only a cold, heavy sense of finality. I arrived at my sister Carol's house, the designated neutral ground for this family summit, at exactly 2 p.m. I wasn't carrying a bottle of wine or a pumpkin pie. I was carrying a heavy leather briefcase. The house was full, just as I'd expected. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all summoned under false pretenses to act as the jury for my trial. The air was thick with a tense, feigned cheerfulness that fooled no one. My sons were there, huddled together near the fireplace. They looked awful. They were thinner, their faces etched with the strain of the past few weeks. They greeted me with strained, hollow smiles and awkward, one-armed hugs. They had clearly rehearsed this. Their contrition was a performance, and they had cast the entire family as their audience. We sat down to dinner at Carol's large dining table. The conversation was stilted, a minefield of awkward pauses and carefully chosen neutral topics. I could feel the eyes of my relatives on me, studying me, trying to gauge my mood. I ate my turkey and stuffing with a calm, deliberate pace, revealing nothing. After the plates were cleared, Mark, as the eldest, stood up, clearing his throat. He held a wine glass, his hand trembling slightly. "Before we have dessert," he began, his voice thick with a well-rehearsed emotion, We as a family need to talk about what's been happening. About Dad." He turned to look at me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was a masterful performance. "Dad, we are so sorry. What we said that night, it was monstrous. There's no excuse. We were scared about your health. We were panicked about our own lives, and we said horrible, unforgivable things. We love you. You're our father. And we're terrified we're going to lose you, not to sickness, but to this anger that has consumed you." Leo, Daniel, and Sam nodded in perfect, solemn unison, their faces masks of profound sorrow. I saw my sister Carol dab at her eyes with a napkin. Several of my cousins looked at me with expressions of pity and gentle reproach. The trap was perfectly set. I was the angry, vengeful old man, and they were the penitent, loving sons. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then I placed my briefcase on the table with a solid, definitive thud that made several people jump. "I appreciate the performance, Mark," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet, sanctimonious atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. "The blocking was a little clumsy, and your delivery lacked real conviction. But I'll give you points for the effort." I clicked open the briefcase. The sound was unnaturally loud in the silent room. I pulled out the 4 thick folders and laid them side by side on the table, a final damning testament. "You're right. We do need to talk. Not about my anger, but about your consequences." I picked up the first folder, the one with Mark's name on it. "Mark, as of 9 a.m. yesterday, Apex Financial Recovery, your primary creditor, filed for an involuntary bankruptcy petition against your shell corporation. As you have personally guaranteed all its debts, the petition extends to you. All of your assets, including the equity in your home, your car, and your bank accounts, are now under the control of a court-appointed trustee. You are, for all legal and practical purposes, destitute. Mark's face went from pale to a ghastly, waxy white. I picked up the second folder. Leo, this is a foreclosure notice. As you know, Apex purchased the second mortgage on your condo. What you don't know is that we also purchased the primary mortgage from the bank last week after they deemed you a high-risk client. You are in default on both. You and your family have 30 days to vacate the premises I gave you the down payment for. I reached into my pocket and slid a set of car keys across the polished table. They skittered to a halt in front of him. This is for a 10-year-old, reliable Toyota Camry. It's registered in your name and paid in full. It's practical. It's more than you deserve. Leo stared at the keys, as if they were two venomous snakes, unable to touch them. The third folder. Daniel, this is a copy of a wire transfer confirmation. Apex has paid your legal fees and settled the civil fraud case against you. You're welcome. I paused. We have also, as a gesture of corporate citizenship, provided the district attorney's office with a full, unredacted file of your financial dealings, including your arrangement with the loan shark and evidence of several other fraudulent investment schemes Ms. Thorne uncovered. They have expressed a keen interest in speaking with you about charges that go far beyond the civil suit. I believe the term they used was racketeering. Daniel made a small choking sound and looked like he was going to be physically sick. Finally, I picked up the fourth folder, the thinnest one, and looked at Sam. Sam, your file is the simplest. As of the 1st of next month, your monthly allowance is terminated. Your apartment lease, which expires in 2 weeks, will not be renewed. Your phone, your car insurance, and your health insurance will be disconnected. For the first time in your 28 years, you are entirely on your own. Good luck. The room was utterly, profoundly silent. My extended family stared, their mouths agape, their faces a canvas of shock and disbelief. They had come for a family drama. They had witnessed a public execution. My sister Carol finally found her voice, a horrified whisper. Arthur, my God, they are your children. No, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. I stood up and looked down at the 4 broken, shattered men sitting at the table. They are not. My children died in my heart the day I came home from the hospital, wanting nothing more than to feel their arms around me, and instead heard them calmly and rationally planning my death to get their hands on my money. I let that statement sink in. I watched as the shock on the faces of my relatives turned to dawning, sickening horror as they finally understood the depth of the betrayal, the true reason for my actions. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice low and steady as I addressed the whole room, my jury. This is a final lesson in accounting, a subject I tried to teach them my whole life. Every action has a debit, and every action has a credit. For 30 years, I foolishly paid all their debts. Now, the ledger is being balanced. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving the 4 folders on the table like headstones. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, but for the first time in my life, their opinions, their feelings, their very existence meant nothing to me. As I closed the front door behind me, I heard the eruption of chaos, the shouting, the crying, the accusations. It was the sound of a family imploding under the unbearable weight of its own greed and lies. I walked to my car through the crisp November air, which felt cleaner and fresher than it had in years. I had lost 4 sons, but I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my peace. The revenge was complete. But the real victory wasn't in their ruin. It was in my freedom. The enabling was over. The long, painful, expensive lesson was finally complete. And I was, at last, free.